Hey everyone, and welcome to this video covering project contract in Dynamics 365 Project Service Automation. In this video, I'll create a project contract in a couple of different ways. I'll add some contract line details and some contract lines and go over some tips and tricks in creating a project contract. So let's jump into the system and see what the project contract actually looks like. All right, so first off, we have two different ways of creating a project contract. We can either create it based off a quote that we've done in Dynamics 365, or we can create a project contract from scratch. So let me just first show you how to create a project contract from a quote. All right, so let's select navigate to Project Service, and then Quotes, and I have a demo quote ready in a status of draft in the system. So let's open that up. All right, so I have everything pre-populated, like the contracting unit and the account manager and the customer, etc. So let's close the quote as one. And we'll see that a project contract is automatically created. Now, it's important to remember to create the quote in the context of project service automation. And what I mean by that is when you go to quote and you create a new quote, you have to select project information as the form. And you can see on the top left corner here that it says order project information, which means that this is actually the project contract form for PSA. Now it says order because the project contract uses the order entity of Dynamics 365. All right, so we have a contract set up here, which was created off of a quote. And now let's take a look at another way of creating a contract. All right, we have a demo contract here ready, so let me just click on that. And just for the sake of brevity, I've already pre-populated some of the fields like the product price list, which is the sales price list, and a requested delivery date, etc. I've left the billing and print setup out because that's not really relevant for the purpose of this video. A couple of things about the fields. The contract status, when it's in draft, you can then edit the fields on the project contract. Now, if you click on confirm, which confirms the contract, and you need to come back, you can still change the status reason to draft and edit the contract afterwards. One important field is the requested delivery date. It's always a good idea to set this to some date that is either, well, preferably known. That's information from your customer. If you don't set this field, then you might run into situations where Dynamics will tell you that you don't have this field populated and that you need to insert a value so that you can proceed. So it's a good thing to do this at the start. So about the project contract form itself, we're on the Summary tab. So we have all the basic information for the project contract under Summary. Under Contract Performance, we have some key metrics and some analytics. Now, I'm not getting too deep into the contract performance tab because this video is more about creating the project contract than it is about analyzing the performance of the contract. So an important tab here at the bottom is the contract lines tab. And we have two different subgrids here. We have project baselines as well as product baselines. Now for the product baselines, you might want to use these if you sell, for example, software licenses or tangible goods, etc., together with your project-based sales. We're focusing on the project-based lines here because we're talking about project work that's perhaps done by, for example, by a consultant or a lawyer or something of that nature. So let's click on plus so we can add some contract lines to the contract. Let's give her just a sec to load up. All right. So now we're adding a project contract line, and the product type should automatically carry to project-based service. You can change that if it doesn't. If it stays on product, you can change it to project-based service. And let's give this contract line a name. Let's just call this work for project X. And under billing method, we can choose between time and material and fixed price. And I'll demonstrate both. I'll do time and material first. So we'll choose time and material, then we'll choose a project that we want to associate this contract line with. Now let's associate this with project X. All right. So next is the choice of including time, expense, and or fees. Now this is important. When you make a contract line and you associate a project with that specific contract line like we're doing right now, we can only include time, expense, and fees one time on one single project contract line. What I mean is, when I close out of this and I create another project contract line for this same project, if I try to include time or expense or fees on two different lines, I'm getting a business process error. So if you have a situation where you need to associate time and material, for example, time and expense on project line, contract line 1, and then on a second contract line for that same project, you need to choose a billing method of fixed price. You can include fees on that contract line as long as you don't include expenses or time on the second line. And I'll show you this in detail. So I'm going to exclude fees, and let's just make this contracted amount worth 1,000. Let's say the customer budget is 1,000 as well. All right. So next thing we'll choose is an invoice frequency. Now this isn't mandatory, but if you have a fixed invoice frequency, it's a good idea to set this up. So I have first a month already made in the system, so let's choose that. And let's choose a billing start date as well. And let's start the billing on the 1st of November. And let's save the changes. All right, so now we have a project contract line created. The next step is to create project contract line details. Now the terminology may be a little bit confusing. We have a project contract, and the project contract has contract lines, and the contract line has contract line details. All right, so to add contract line details, we can either click on plus and add some details manually, or we can import contract line details from project estimation. And what this does is it imports project contract line details from the work breakdown structure that is related to project X. So let's see what this looks like. Let's click on import. And let's summarize by transaction type, also by role, and also by category. And we can choose the summarize by as either leaf, root, etc. So we'll just leave this at leaf node. Click on next and finish it up. All right, so here we can see that we have some contract line details based on the project that we have associated this contract line with. Now for the sake of argument, let's add one contract line detail manually as well. All right, so let's call the description consultant work, for example. It'll be time. Role will be consultant. We have this set up in the system already. Let's choose category as blank, and let's set quantity at 10 and unit as hours. If we have an estimated tax, we can fill that up here. The amount we can leave blank. We have both a cost price list as well as a sales price list naturally associated in the system. So we'll just, let's close out of here. In the system, which will automatically generate the price. Well, let's close this here so it doesn't blink. All right, so now we have some contract line details set for this project contract, and we can see the quantities, the units, the sales prices, and the extended amounts here on this subgrid. All right, so let's close out of here. Remember, we chose include fee as no, and we have billing method as time and material. So let's create another project contract line. Now, if we want to, we can associate this second project contract line on a different project. So we can have multiple project contract lines, and each line can be associated with a different project, because you might have one contract that acts as the contract towards, for example, 2 or 3 different projects that you might actually be running simultaneously. Let's call this additional work. Let's give her just a second to load up again. Let's try that again. Nope. Here we go. I'm working on a trial environment, so sometimes trials are a little bit slower than actual production instances. So let's choose, this is fixed price. And now if I leave these at yes, yes, and yes for time, expense, and fee, and I use project X, I get that business process error that I just mentioned previously. All right, so let's exclude time and exclude expense and only leave fee. And click on save. And Dynamics will let me proceed. All right, so let's set the contracted amount at, let's say 10,000. And the customer budget at 10,000 as well. Now we'll set the invoice frequency. Let's put that again at first a month. And the billing start date will be 1st of November. All right, so here I get a message that says the sum of the amount in billing milestones 0 must be equal to the line amount 10,000. Now what that means is I have to set up billing milestones, and the sum of those billing milestones have to be equal to the contracted amount. So I have the invoice frequency set, I have the billing start date set. If I scroll down, I can see that the invoice schedule is blank. So after I've associated some contract line details, I'll then create the billing milestones. So let's add some contract line details. And this was for a fixed price and fee. So we'll just call that fees. We'll leave the row blank and category blank. We'll use pieces as units. We'll put quantity as 1 and a unit price as 10,000. And I'll click on save. All right, so we get some contract line details. Next, we'll create the periodic milestones. As you can see, the yellow message went away. And we have an invoice schedule where the first milestone is the 1st of November and for 10,000 euros. Now, when I double click here, as you can see, it says invoice status not ready for invoicing. When I'm ready to invoice this, I'll just come down here and click on invoice status and click on ready for invoicing. So if you create an invoice from a project contract and you've not set this invoice status to ready for invoicing, then, well, you're not actually getting an invoice for the 10,000. All right, so let's close out of here. And we now have 2 different contract lines, one for fixed price and one for time and material. So let's actually click back here on the time and material one and check the invoice schedule again, because I think I forgot to do that. All right, here we go. We're almost set up again. All right, so let's double check the invoice schedules. We don't have anything set. We forgot to do that. That's all right. We're still working on a draft contract so we can edit the details. And let's click on create invoice schedule. Now, as you can see that on the time and material billing method, the button says create invoice schedule. It doesn't say create milestones like it said on the fixed price. So let's create the invoice schedule. And as you can see, we have the billing start date set. And we'll have an invoice schedule where the first invoice will run on the 1st of November. Oh, let's click out of this blinking Teams again. All right, so we can close out of here. And we have successfully created a project contract that has 2 project contract lines, and those lines have some project contract line details. Now, next up, what would happen is when the contract is all set, we can click on confirm. The status reason changes to confirmed. And now when we do actual work towards the project, for example, let's say we do some consulting work and we submit times and approve those, and we need to create an invoice. We can come down here to the ribbon and click on create invoice, and an invoice will be created. Now, I'm going to demonstrate this in a different video, so we're not getting into that right now, but invoices are created from the context of the project contract. All right, so one thing worth mentioning is when you want to actually check the actuals towards that have that you have towards your project contract, you come over here next to the name of the contract and you click on the down arrow, and under common you can see actuals. Now under these actuals you'll get all those financial details, all those transaction details that you have going on towards your project contract. Naturally, we don't have anything set right now because we haven't done any invoices, so it'll not show anything. But here under the actuals, you'll see how your contract is actually performing. All right, so this pretty much wraps up the creation of project contract in Dynamics 365 Project Service Automation. I hope you enjoyed this brief video, and hit some comments on my blog if you want to ask some additional questions, and have a good one.